Hello and welcome to the first episode of the Origin Point podcast, where I interview artists and I ask them how they started from when they were really young all the way to how they became the artists that they are today. Today I'm interviewing Grant Wilk. You may know him online as Remington Creative. He's a very talented software developer, digital artist, and he has a YouTube channel with over 60,000 subscribers where he teaches 3D design in Blender. So let's get into the interview. All right, welcome to the first episode of Origin Point. As I stated before, this is Grant Wilk of Remington Graphics. So, as the podcast goes, you just tell your story from where you started in the very beginning when you were really young to today. So, what was your first step into, what was the first little thing as a little kid that you were, drawing or whatever? What was the first thing that you did when you were younger?
Well, when I was younger, I was actually really just absolutely, completely, and totally not into art. If I would have told myself when I was, in first or second grade that I would have anything to do with art when I got older, I would have thought I was crazy because, I'd go to art class every day and we'd be doing stuff with paints. We'd be doing stuff with, sculpture and making clay stuff. And honestly, I found it was it's fun, but it was never, something that really, really interested me. But the thing that really kind of piqued my interest into the world of art or anything art related in the first place was when I watched Transformers. Funny enough, that was actually my inspiration because I remember it was the first time that somebody had told me that these elements in these movies, these larger than life elements were CG, and I had no idea what CG meant before then. I was maybe how old was I when Transformers came out? Like 9, 10?
Yeah.
Something around there. And so I had never heard the word CG before. And when they explained to me that it was computer generated, that computers made that, it just blew my mind because I couldn't stop thinking about it. Like, how in the world does a computer create something that is indecipherable from, real life?
Yeah.
How in the world can that happen? And I think that's really what triggered that click to me. There's this one scene, I remember vividly. It was a fight between Optimus Prime and I think Bone Crusher. And I remember that scene and just thinking, imagining how the computer went through. I thought maybe an artist went in and drew in each pixel individually. But that's really what sparked my interest. And as time went on, more and more things built on top of that. And eventually I just, got involved. And that was, the start of it all.
What was the what was the first program? I'm assuming you didn't even go from drawing. If I'm correct, you just went straight to the computer, right? From that sort of awe. What was the first program that you dove into that was let's try this?
Well, when I first dived into this stuff, it actually wasn't with the intention of getting into necessarily the art component. It was more of, I don't know how to describe it. It was more of just a general interest in computers, I guess. Yeah. That inspired it all. And so I started with a program called Scratch. And that's where really any of the artistry started, because in Scratch, you have the ability to create these things called sprites, which are basically, elements that move around on a screen during a game or something. And I actually kind of enjoyed designing those and creating those. And eventually Scratch would lead on to me discovering Blender. So Blender really was the first actual dedicated, art application that I ever used. But Scratch was the thing that kind of sparked my interest and allowed me to discover more and discover that I was actually interested in the art components.
That's really interesting. So when you were really young, were there some programs not art related that were more, computer science related that was something that you were very, very interested in?
I'm trying to remember. I think Scratch was really, really the big, the big starting point for me. Because I can tell you, I took a class in third grade that introduced me to the very basics of Scratch at a local community college. And that it just sparked this interest in just wanting to learn more about this and wanting to create more. And I think actually what that really did is me learning about Scratch really inspired my desire to create.
Okay.
More than anything, it just made me want to create something, wanted me to make something. And I think that's really what pushed everything further was that. So I don't think there's any other application, but Scratch for sure would be a big one.
And I'm sure you had, whenever you were first learning it, was there that that awe of wow, this is such a really cool, crazy thing that I'm learning? Do you come from a
Yeah.
very artistic family, or do they do many other things?
I didn't think I did, but as I learn more and more about my family, I'm realizing that I really do.
Yeah.
Um, because growing up, I mean, both of my parents worked in marketing. My sister went to school for counterterrorism. I'm going to school to be a computer engineer. Which, if you look at those, I mean, maybe marketing could be a little bit art related, but they're
Yeah.
all associated with the oh hey who do we need to talk to and what's our audience, all that stuff. So they're not like the creative marketing; they're the business marketing.
Yeah.
And when you look at that, you don't think like that they're artistic at all. You wouldn't think that in any regard. But then as I dive into things more and more, I'm realizing that my mom started getting really into photography when I was like 6 years old. She has like some big honking cameras now that she uses for sports photography, which I never considered. And then my sister too has just been just going crazy with all sorts of weird photography stuff. She's a lot more interested in like portrait photography and pictures of people and stuff like that,
Yeah.
and editing them and making sure their colors balanced correctly. And even before that, my grandma was like an award-winning. I don't even know what to call her artwork that she did, but it's basically like it's like the predecessor to pixel art. Basically, you had like a canvas and you'd like stitch different like pixels on it. Actually, I have a painting out in the hallway. Can I go get that and show
Yeah.
that to you?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, or not a painting, but I have no other way to describe it. Oh. All right. So basically, what it is each one of these things in here is like a little pixel.
Okay, so that's
And
the medium is
so this
fabric,
is
right?
yeah. And so
Okay.
this is one of the things that she made. I don't know what the medium's actually called itself, but like she made things like this, and we've got like 6 of these around our house. I
Wow.
didn't know she made these until like 2 years ago.
So
I
for
thought
those
these
of
were just
y'all
things we had.
listening, what it was an image of a wolf, I think in the woods, and it
Yeah.
looks like pixels, but it's sort of woven with fabric. So it's like
Yeah,
pixel.
that's a good
Okay, yeah, that's a good description. Sort of like fabric pixel art. That's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
What did your
But
whenever
yeah.
you were in third grade learning Scratch? What did your family think about that? Like, what were they?
I mean, they thought it was cool, I think.
Yeah.
It was my first like introduction to doing anything programming related. And anytime you can do something with a computer where you press a button and something happens, it's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Especially if you made that happen. If you just download an application and click an application, blah blah, somebody else made it, whatever. But when you're the one that even does something as simple as pressing a button to make a character move to the right on the screen, that's
Yeah.
sort of it's something that you can take pride in, even if it's so simple like that.
Yeah.
But they were always super supportive of it, always looked at it like it was super cool. I remember even showing some of my sister's friends what I did, and they were like, "How'd you do that?" Because I mean, Scratch gives such a a simple route to making things like that, but it's a route nonetheless, and
Yeah.
it works.
What did your Scratch? If I've never heard of Scratch. So you mentioned sprites. So what did
Yes.
the things you made? What did they generally look like at that time?
It's like 2D scribbles, basically. If you can imagine making something in Microsoft Paint,
Yeah.
that is basically what you got to create within Scratch. You got the same tools to create a sprite in Scratch.
Okay.
The only difference would be that maybe there was a little bit better anti-aliasing on the sides of the brushes. That's the only difference. So anything that you can create in Scratch was basically something you could create in Microsoft Paint. And I mean, you could create literally anything. You could just doodle out like a very simple character. You could animate them, so you could like make the body of them, and then have a separate mouth sprite that like moved to different syllables or whatever,
Yeah.
to like give a limp sync or a lip sync emulation, I guess, and stuff like that. So I mean, really, it's hard to say what exactly they looked like, but you can imagine some of them were pretty atrocious. Some of them were better, depending on how much time you put into it.
Yeah.
So,
So what came after? What came after that in your sort of artistic journey?
well, after Scratch, Well, I should mention the connector here. Scratch. I saw this Scratch project where this guy had a 3D character. It was a 3D character of what's called the Scratch Cat, which is kind of like the mascot of Scratch,
Yeah.
and a tank. and it was like real 3D. It's everybody would always try to like, make fake 3D in Scratch and stuff by like drawing sprites in certain ways and distorting them and stuff. But this was like real 3D with like specular reflections, all that stuff. And so I was looking at that and I was like, I want to make that. I want a 3D sprite in my game. That's so cool. So, of course, I just ripped off his model for a few games. Because you can do that on Scratch. It's called remixing. It's basically downloading somebody else's project, and then you can edit it and create it for yourself.
Yeah.
But after a while, I was like, okay, dude, listen, you got to tell me how in the world you got this actual 3D model and how you created it. Because what it actually was it was just like it was a sprite sheet is what it was. So it's just, the Scratch cat facing 0 degrees, 15 degrees, 180 degrees, like at different increments that you just change the image that's being displayed there. So I knew he had created this in some sort of external application, but I had no idea where. And so I messaged him and he replied, he's like, oh yeah, I used a software called Blender. And I was like, Blender? Okay. So I hopped over to Google, typed in Blender, searched it up, tried to come up with anything that I could find that wasn't an actual like commercial blender, like a blender you put food in.
Yeah.
But I found it eventually. I think I found it by like searching like Blender 3D modeling or something like that, or Blender 3D, which coincidentally is the name of Blender. I downloaded it, I opened it up, and I was just appalled by how complicated everything looks, because this is way back in the 2.4 era.
What year do you think that was?
It was 2011.
Okay.
So this was like early Blender, where the UI was just an absolute, complete and total abomination. It was like, people think Blender 2.79 was bad. you really got to go back and look at older Blender versions. They are hideous. But in that application, I created my first few 3D models, which really weren't 3D models at all, but they were basically just a cube with a bunch of modifiers on it, because I had no idea how to do anything. I created my first few models anyway. I rendered them out using the old Blender internal rendering engine. My first render was the default cube. The really old default cube, may I add, where it had the blue background, and it was all done with the raster rendering as opposed to cycles. Yeah. I'm not sure if cycles even existed back then.
No, I
certainly didn't know about it if it did. But I rendered off a few things, put them together in a Scratch project that's still up today, put a Black Eyed Peas song in the background as it like cycled through them, and posted it to Scratch. And then I didn't touch Blender again for like 2 or 3 years.
Wow.
And that's how I got introduced to Blender, funny enough.
And so eventually you got back into it. Were there anything between that time that you got back into Blender that you kept working on, kept learning in terms of, developing computer science, anything like that brought you back to, doing the next thing, basically?
Minecraft.
Minecraft.
Of all things, it was Minecraft. Minecraft as a game, I give it a lot of credit for a lot of the things that I'm interested in today, believe it or not. It's a simple game. Pick up a block, put it down somewhere else, make something. But just like Scratch did, Minecraft inspired me to create things.
Yeah.
It also got me involved in, right after that whole Scratch incident is when YouTube started becoming a really big thing in 2012-ish. That started becoming like a fundamental part of my life. I would spend like, huge amounts of time, maybe I should say wasting huge amounts of time watching, random YouTube videos. And one thing that I found particularly interesting between Minecraft and YouTube was the Minecraft community on YouTube. Because I wouldn't ever watch like actual Minecraft YouTubers, like who's Captain Sparkles and Ant Venom or whatever. That I remember those being two big ones back when I was learning about stuff. They would always be like, everybody would be like, oh, you watch this new video by this person, or the Yogs cast or whatever.
Yeah.
I was never interested in them. I was always interested in the people that made Minecraft animations.
Okay.
Because I found them to just be absolutely awesome. Because a lot of the time they took, the base content of the game, and then they added to it, like by, for example, rendering in a path tracing rendering engine, which just makes everything look beautiful. And the stories they would tell, and the the characters they would develop and the humor they included. And it was also relatable for, 12, 13-year-old me that eventually I decided to look into actually creating those animations myself. So really Minecraft was that thing that kind of bridged me back into it all after I closed Blender out of being horrified by it back in 2011.
And so I'm assuming you went back into learning 3D. It's like, okay, I got to start modeling these characters and these environments.
Mm-hmm.
So what was that process like for you?
It's hard for me to remember. I actually remember jumping into it fairly easily though. I started off by actually downloading a Minecraft rig that somebody else had made and just like playing around with basic keyframed animations. I think the inspiration for it was me and my friend, his name's Kyle. He was starting a YouTube channel.
Yeah.
And he needed an intro for it. And he was going to be Minecraft and Magic. That was his YouTube channel. And so we were sitting up in his bedroom one day and he was like, "Oh, check this out. I learned how to make Minecraft animations." And I was like, "Nah, no." And he was like, yeah. And so he opens up this application. He moves it around a little bit and he renders out a sequence. And it's basically a Minecraft character just like flailing his arms in the air and moving around crazy, like blocks flying everywhere. But it was a Minecraft animation. And I was like, So I immediately, because whenever we hung out, we always brought, computers to each other's houses, how we did. And I immediately whipped out my computer, downloaded the same application, loaded up the same rig that he had, and started creating an intro for him because he needed one for his Minecraft Magic YouTube channel.
Yeah.
And later that night, I had completed a full-on Minecraft animation of this guy like walking down a hill, throwing a sword at a TNT block, and it exploding, and his name appears.
Wow.
And so it was pretty straightforward for me to pick it up. I don't know why. I think maybe because I had like past experience in video games or something. I think that I've noticed as an educator that people who play a lot of video games tend to pick up 3D modeling a lot easier and 3D animation a lot easier just because they're used to working in a 3D interface. But it's like, yeah, that was kind of like my aha moment for like, I can do this now. This is great.
How long did it take you to make that? So you opened up Blender from having not used it for however long, and then you opened up Blender, and I'm guessing you taught yourself how to model, how to animate it, and then you eventually put together that sequence.
Yeah.
How long did that take you?
I didn't have to do a lot of modeling because I already had the majority of the experience with, or I already had the majority of that process completed by the rig that I downloaded. So they had a Minecraft character modeled, a selection of blocks ready for me to use. What I did, oh gosh, I don't know. I legitimately just like, when it comes down to it, I think I just picked it up. I don't remember like anything, the process of creating it or anything. I just remember having it done later that night.
So it took you
it took me a night.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It was maybe like I started around 5 o'clock and I was done around midnight.
Wow.
With the final rendered product.
So programs like that have you noticed that you're pretty good at just picking up programs now?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's always been a strong point of mine. I think it's just partially because I've been, working with computers and working around computers for so long that I have experience with a variety of different interfaces and a variety of different software tools. So there's some sort of like neuroplasticity, I guess, that copies over just to be able to look at something and find my way around it, even if I'm not 100% familiar with it.
Wow. How old were you when you made that intro?
I was 13.
Okay.
So
and then
that was my first like real jump into it, I guess, was when I was 13. Because I don't count the stuff when I was 11. Although I made it, it wasn't really. It was just kind of weird abstract models that I found by clicking buttons.
Wow.
So
That's how I started out with what I was doing, just making the weirdest thing possible and then learning it. So what came after that? Did you keep working in Blender and just like started learning more and more and more? Yeah,
it was actually at that point that I ended up starting my own YouTube channel. And it was before that I started my YouTube channel. I wanted to do the same thing that my friend was doing. I wanted a Minecraft YouTube channel. In fact, the first video on my channel is still a Minecraft video. I promised myself I would never take it down. But I after I finished that intro for him, I think after I did it that night, I came back and I revised it a little bit more, smoothed out some of the animations, and I even took it into like a video editing software to retime it so it went with some music that I made for it as well. Because of course it was my first animation ever. It was horribly timed. Horribly timed.
Do you still have access to that animation?
It's actually still up on YouTube.
Oh, okay.
I was gonna get to that in a sec. Yeah. So after I retimed it and redid that, I was like, there's a lot of people out there making intro templates for Minecraft people. So I was like, why not just release this as an intro template? So I modified it slightly, tweaked it a little bit so other people could download it, put it in a zip file, uploaded it to like Dropbox or something, and then I put out a YouTube video and I was like, Minecraft intro template, and then I put a download link in there, and that video actually is what kind of sparked my channel growing. So that video can still be found on my channel, and I think it's got to have like 20,000 views or something like that. But it blew my mind like after I got like 200 views, because I had up until that point been making Minecraft and gaming videos and stuff like that, or just random walking around the yard with my friend Kyle. I don't know what we thought we were doing, but we would just do weird stuff in my yard. Didn't think that was YouTube worthy. But none of that took off. But when I posted that intro, that got a lot of attention to my channel, and that's made me want to do more. It made me want to create more and more intro templates. And
it was that aha moment for you.
It was an aha moment in terms of my YouTube channel, and I guess after I had figured it was confirmation that I had figured out what I needed to do in order to be somewhat successful in terms of Minecraft animations, I guess.
What was the name of the channel back then?
It was, oh man, it was probably called X Remington 04.
Okay.
Because my name up the whole time, like for everything, had been Remington 04, and I tried to create a YouTube channel with that name, but somebody had taken it.
Wow.
I was so sad. So I did X Remington 04. It's the 2012 thing to do, to add an X in front of your name because somebody else has your username.
Of course. Yeah, I remember going through YouTube name after YouTube name back when I was doing it, because I have a very long history of just the worst channels ever, and I have some very bad videos somewhere on YouTube. But I totally know what it's like to be running around with your friend in the backyard, like making awful videos.
Just for comparison, just so you and your viewers get an idea of how awful this was. We had an egg, like a raw egg. We wrote Jimersum on it. That was its name, like Jimersum. That was its name. I don't know how he came up with that. We at one point completely smeared it and started referring to it as purple smear. And then we went into my backyard and my friend Kyle dropped it on a rock. That was the video.
That was the narrative.
that was my interpretation of what was YouTube worthy content back then. But I was just a little bit off, just a little bit.
So when you uploaded the template and you started seeing people respond to it, did you make any more templates after that?
Yeah. People, I mean, I had after I uploaded that template and people started using it, I started like actively searching YouTube, like, ooh, who used my intro template? Like, let's search in the credits of their description. So I'd like type in my username and see all the videos, and they were like, two or three every day would pop up, and I'd be like, yeah.
That must have been amazing.
I was like, I was, as a 13-year-old, that was incredibly gratifying seeing other people use my stuff. So I decided to try and make another one, and little did I know the second one would be my biggest hit yet, considering it's only my second hit. But I created another intro template called, I think I called it the Minecraft Smash intro template, where a Minecraft character walks in, he like jumps up and like places a few blocks underneath himself so he can get up high enough to mine some diamonds.
Yeah.
He pulls a pickaxe from behind his back, mines the diamonds, and then all of a sudden just like a freight train of text flies out from behind the mined diamond block, just knocks him flat on the ground and crushes him. And that name is just your name.
That's
and
amazing.
And that was my Minecraft Smash intro template, and that thing went haywire. At least from my perspective. Looking back on it, it did okay, I guess. But back then, having 100, 200 subscribers, thing got like 26,000 views in the first 2 weeks.
Wow, being that young and
I
having
was like,
20,000 views.
I was like, what? Because like previously, like literally just weeks before, I posted like a Gary's mod video of me playing scary maps in Gary's mod, and it got like 100 views, and I was hyped.
Yeah.
But 26,000 in a few weeks for something I created in maybe a day or two, I was so very excited seeing that, and it opened up a lot of doors for me. In fact, people started reaching out to me saying, "Hey, can you make me an intro?" Because everybody back in the day had to have a cool Minecraft dubstep intro.
Yeah.
So there was a huge market for it. A lot of smaller channels started reaching out to me, and I basically just started cranking out intros left and right, creating as much as I possibly could. Um, Making more intro templates along the way with different themes. Like I made one of like a car wheel. I made one that was like medieval themed. And with every single one, these were all made in Blender, mind you. Every single one, I learned a new Blender feature. I learned how to use cycles. I learned how to light things better. I learned how to animate textures. And slowly but surely, over time, as I continued working on these, very very 2014-esque motion graphics, I built up a pretty good understanding.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. That's an interesting story. Just like making those.
Yeah,
I can't
so
imagine
exciting.
being, because I remember when I was doing the YouTube thing when I was much younger, I remember getting like 50 views and like showing my parents. So having 20,000 views must have been wildly
Mom,
novel.
Dad, look! Mom, Dad, look!
What did they say about that? Did your parents see
I don't even know
that?
if I told them.
Oh, really?
I don't know if I told them. I know that my dad did learn, or I either communicated or he just found out somehow, because how parents are, they just find everything out one way or another.
Yeah.
That I was doing this motion graphics work, and considering he worked in marketing, they have a huge creative agency. It is business at the time, or the business he worked for at the time.
Yeah.
And so he would take me in there every now and then and like introduce me to all of them, and I would be like looking around like, whoa, like, because they were working on actual motion graphics.
Yeah.
And stuff like that, and actual anything design related really. And I was looking at them and I was like, these guys are way out of my league, but that's cool that I'm here anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, they noticed eventually. I don't know if I ever really expressed the viewership that I got at the time, but yeah,
there was definitely they could see that you were interested in that and you were doing things with it.
Yeah, and they wanted to encourage me to keep doing that as well, which was very helpful.
Yeah.
And very appreciated.
Yeah, and so I'm assuming eventually you got pretty good at Blender and you started making tutorials.
Yeah, I think, I don't know what inspired me to actually create my first tutorial. You and me were talking about this the other day. How we were like, what made me want to make a tutorial? I'm trying to think what got me into that, but I still just have no idea. I do know that my first tutorials were teaching people how to customize their intro templates. So when I made an intro template, I would make a tutorial that went along with it that said, here's how you customize it, here's how you make it your own. And so those were my first one-off tutorials. I even made some about how to create a modded Minecraft server.
Yeah.
That was another one, and it's completely unrelated to Blender, but it was a tutorial nonetheless. And that was kind of that was actually my first big video. That was my first video to hit 100,000 views, which it's completely unrelated to my channel now. But I think having done those in the past, that kind of pushed me forward into making more of the content that I do today, because as I got better, I realized there was more and more that I could talk about with what I was doing. And so I started sharing it more frequently. And it started off with my first actual Blender tutorial that wasn't an intro template customization, was like how to create a really simple physics-based game where basically you have like a ball that drops onto a plane, and you can use WASD to roll it into a pile of boxes. And this was all in Blender Game Engine. But then I came back and revisited those a few times because they did well. And so I kept, making more and more over time. And eventually my audience started building. And then I think that continued from like 2014 throughout 2015 is just those intermittent tutorials. And then in 2016, I don't know what happened, but something kicked in me. And I was like, videos twice a week.
Were other people in the YouTube community doing that? Because I remember looking at YouTube a long time ago, and the sort of the standard was once a week.
You know, I honestly don't remember, but yeah, the only tutorial channel I ever even really remember is Blender Guru. He was the OG.
Of
He was the
course.
OG big guy. And then I also remember, what is it? Tutor for You,
Yeah.
I think was one of them. And those two, I think, were the only two actual Blender tutorial channels that I ever had anything to do with. I don't think I actually subscribed to either of them ever until I actually started, really getting into Blender and dedicating my stuff to Blender.
Yeah.
But yeah. Oh man, I just remembered something that happened that helped me get into the whole art thing.
What was that?
Back when so this was actually before I used Blender.
Okay.
Before I came back to Blender, there was a program called Aurora 3D,
I think I've
and
heard
it
of
was
that.
like it was a very basic like 3D motion graphics software where like you had objects and you could translate them, rotate them, scale them, but that's all. You couldn't do like bone deformations, you couldn't do particle systems, and all that. And it had like a really simple render engine built in, and I used that to create the intro that is in the very first video on my channel, that Minecraft video that I was talking about earlier. So I guess I did have a predecessor to that too. Sorry to jump back there all of a sudden. I
That's
just
all
remembered
good.
that.
Yeah.
Thought it might be interesting to talk about. But yeah, man, I forgot about that. Aurora 3D.
Aurora. So you started, so you were at a point where you're like, okay, 2 videos a week.
Yeah,
How did that go?
horrible. I hated it. I was because when I would have been a sophomore in high school.
Yeah.
I think I started it in the fall. So right as the school year was starting up, I was like, kick it into gear, let's go. And so I started just like, brainstorming ideas. And I had myself on a schedule where Monday I would record, Tuesday I would edit, Wednesday I would wrap up any editing or anything I had to do, make a thumbnail, metadata, and post. And then Thursday, Friday, Saturday, same thing, post on Saturday. So I got in this 3-day cycle. And then on Sundays, I just, do whatever. And it went really well for like the first few weeks. I made a bunch of tutorials that were all relevant topics. Some of them did really well, which was very, welcome, obviously. Some of them didn't do anything at all. And it was the really hard part was balancing that on top of school, because doing 2 of those a week made it, I had to dedicate a lot of time outside of school to this. Unfortunately, I've always been a good student. I always pick up things literally just by hearing them in class,
Yeah.
even at a college level, and I'm so thankful that I have that ability. But so I didn't really have to do a whole lot outside of class, but still having to dedicate so much time to that made it really hard to keep doing things. And even with the free time I had, eventually that free time would go away when spring came around, because I was doing track, and track takes up an additional 2 to 3 hours after school. I pole vaulted, and
Okay.
pole vaulters always stayed an extra 30 minutes to an hour after practice, because our sport was so specialized, to continue working with our coach on stuff. So it gobbled up a lot of time. And so in the fall, I saw this coming, and I kept the 2 videos a week going for 2 or 3 weeks. But then after a while, I was like, man, I am burned out. I am tired. I don't want to work on this anymore. I even started picking up other projects that I realized that I really wanted to work on those projects more than my 2-a-week videos.
Yeah.
I picked up a short film project called Pokemon Going Insane. That's still up on my channel too. That's an abomination of a short film, but I did it nonetheless. I started picking up more and more projects like that I wanted to dedicate more of my time to, and that 2 videos a week thing really got in the way. So I just started. I don't really know if I took a dedicated approach, but I started missing video dates, and eventually that just turned into me uploading whenever I felt like it, and whenever I felt like putting together a tutorial. And instead, in that meantime that I had between working on videos, I would just work on artistic projects, whether that was actually creating something creating tools that other people can use, or putting together like a short film or a render or something like that. I just spend all my free time doing that, and then occasionally visit videos and stuff like that.
So you mentioned creating tools. What were
Mhm.
some of those tools that you created, and how did you learn to create tools that worked in whatever that they worked in?
I have no idea how I learned to do it. I think I just kind of shot my shot blindly and it hit. I started off with a tool, man. I think really the thing that inspired it was the intros I made earlier, because
Yeah.
then I made, content that people could download, alter, and use in their own way, which essentially it is a tool. It's just a very, very specialized tool, a tool with one product. But I think that, what is it? I think it was my Procedural Pro was the first tool that I ever put out that was actually like a dedicated tool that could be used in multiple situations.
Could you
And for those
describe
of you
what?
who,
Oh,
yeah,
so yeah, were you about to?
yeah. For those of you that aren't familiar, Procedural Pro is basically, it was in its essence, it was a moose grave texture that mixed two image textures together, which is really simple. But what it really did was it allowed you to mix two tileable textures together to make it such that it's harder to tell that you're using tileable textures, right? Because when you have a bunch of them across a very large area, it's easy to tell when you have a bunch of repeating images over and over. But by mixing it with another image very quickly and easily, you can almost completely hide every single seam and every single replication just with some random noise mixed in. And so I put that together for myself because I needed something to hide some textures in some render I was working on. I had
Yeah.
no idea what it was, but I needed it. And then I was like, hey, other people could probably use this. So I packaged it up all nice, made a Blender file for it, and like just put a node group in there, you know, put a little README in the file, put a little demo model in there so you can play with it yourself, saved it and made a video about it, uploaded it, and people started downloading it and people liked it. So following that, I just kept updating it over and over, adding new features to it, making it more than just, one moose grave texture. Eventually, it would progress into becoming what I called Procedural 4, which is the fourth version of it, which is just basically a pack of completely unique procedural textures and stuff like that. But yeah, Procedural Pro was the start to all of that. And I think it's just me making something for myself that I thought other people could use.
And
That
that's just
simple.
like on the YouTube channel, you were learning things, and you thought, well, might as well teach it, and so you made a
Yeah.
tutorial channel. What was the
Yeah,
next? Sorry.
just jumping back to the comment you just made, I think really the whole point of everything that I was doing is it was me learning, and it was just me sharing what I was learning. That's what my whole YouTube channel and every single tool I created was about. It was just me learning and me sharing that learning in a more or less useful way with others. So,
Wow.
yeah.
And then what was the next tool after that?
After that, I think I released my PBR shader, which which a lot of people looked at and they were like, "Oh my gosh, this is awesome! Like, how this guy create such a realistic PBR shader and he released it for free? Mind blown!" People really really love that. But the funny thing that a lot of people don't know about it is I released that shader shortly after Blender Guru released his video on physically based shading from a few years back. I think it was like
I
the
think I
secret to
remember that.
photorealism or something. Yeah, I remember the thumbnail had like a bumpy brick road,
Yeah.
and that's what that's actually what taught me everything that I needed to make that shader. In fact, that shader is basically the node setup that he explains in that video, slightly tweaked. It is almost word for word what he did though.
Could you
Um,
describe for someone who's not a 3D artist what a PBR shader is?
yeah, so there's this basically this way that you can add textures to materials that affects the way that light bounces off of them. And PBR, or physically based rendering, is a set of textures or a set of surface mapping properties that allows something to look partially or more realistic compared to previous techniques. So you can make a Coke can, for example, look like it's made of metal in some areas, and in other places maybe it's got some weird like painting, or you could add like a bump map to a rock, especially with like certain elements where reflections are more dithered, and some places where they're more sharp and stuff like that. So it allows you to basically, PBR shading allows you to really tweak the surface properties of a 3D model such that it reacts realistically in a lit environment for rendering.
Okay,
But
so
yeah,
going back, so what was the tool that you created?
so I created a PBR shader, which basically took existing, I'll call them building block nodes, basically more basic nodes, and used those to create and replicate physically based rendering shaders in the node editor, in the Cycles node editor, before any of that even existed. Because
Okay.
now there's the principled shader. That completely wipes out my entire reason for having my shader in the first place. But before that principled shader existed, I basically created my own implementation of a more rudimentary principled shader that allowed people to access those PBR technologies before they were actually out. But like I mentioned earlier, a lot of that was just derived from a video I watched. And eventually I would build on that later with more techniques that I learned. So it became more of my own thing, but it did just start with stuff I learned from one of Blender Guru's videos.
And then I remember, so we'll jump ahead. Well, we're before denoise. Were there any other tools that you released?
Yeah, there was my first Blender add-on. It was called Atom Bomb. Atom Bomb. Yeah.
Okay, I think I remember
Uh,
that.
yeah, Atom Bomb was, and now it's been rebranded as something called Atomic Data Manager. But Atom Bomb, when it came out, was basically a really simple tool to help people get rid of extra data that's sitting around in their Blender file. Because when you are working in Blender, it's pretty common for you to load up a texture and then get rid of that texture and be like, I don't like that, and then load in a new one, and then load in a new one. You'll cycle through like 10 textures.
Yeah.
And within a few minutes, you've accumulated like masses of textures in your Blender file. And that's not a bad thing. When you save your Blender file and restart it, Blender will go through and it'll filter out all those extra Blender files and stuff, or all those extra resource files and stuff like that. But what Atomic did is it allowed you, or Atom Bomb at the time, sorry, what Atom Bomb did was it basically allowed you to go through and specifically say, okay, get rid of all these extra images, cut them out of the Blender file. That way you didn't have to restart your Blender file. Or if you wanted something specifically, like if you were having trouble with a texture reloading, you could literally just be like, push this individual image, just yank it out of the Blender file, throw it away, and then load it in again. So that was my first add-on. This is really where I'm getting into my real tools, I guess, the stuff that really started to impact people's workflows, other than just providing them, grounds to create new shaders or something like that.
How did you learn how to create an add-on? Because that's not something, say like you open up Blender and you can just start putting nodes together. How did you learn how to make a stable add-on for Blender?
Well, my sophomore year of high school, I took a programming class. I think what's it called? Yeah, it was just called programming. But it basically introduced me to Python, the very basics. I think we got into a little bit of object-oriented programming for those of you who are familiar with programming concepts. We barely got into object-oriented stuff, but when it comes down to it, it was a very basic introduction, and that was enough to help me realize that I could actually make Blender add-on. Because I developed the entirety of Atom Bomb when I was actually on vacation. I didn't know what to do with myself. I was on vacation and I was working just because I didn't know what to do with myself other than that. So I'd be up till like 3 a.m. every night. I think there was a tutorial by Jonathan Williamson from CG Cookie that I watched that helped me get like the basics of like how the user interface works. But a lot of it was just me playing around, plugging things into where they shouldn't be, realizing I did it wrong, plugging it in somewhere else, messing around with it, realizing that a lot of the things I was doing was completely wrong and that I have to start over again. And it was just random. I was basically throwing rocks at it to see if it responded. And after, I was on vacation for a week. It took me the full week to develop. After throwing rocks at it for a week, I finally got in and was able to implement my basic functionality. And that's basically how I learned, was just by throwing rocks at it and hoping it would work. I wish I had looked at the documentation, and I wish I knew how to read documentation when I was doing that stuff, because that would have made that whole process easier, because it would have said, oh, you need materials? Those are in the data section under materials in an array list. But no, we have to I guess they're not in an array list; they're in a dictionary. Whatever, same thing. But it would have been nice to have known how to do any of that stuff, but I had no idea at the time. I just kind of poked at it until it worked, and
So
it did eventually.
from that, you pretty much learned how to, code and things like that. Learning how to make an add-on. For me, that I have no idea how to even begin. Even my college classes, I'm learning some CSS and some HTML, and I still can't wrap my head around it. And so you found it very enjoyable to do that kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a really fun puzzle, is what it was. I've always been the type of person to have an idea and then jump in head first. It might be like 1,000 miles deep, but no matter what, I'm gonna jump in head first. I'm gonna swim to the bottom and get to whatever I want to get to, even if it like kills me. It's always been the type of person I am. I like to set big goals and then just full on charge into them, and that's dangerous sometimes, but. I always, that was one of those. I just kind of set a goal. I was like, I want to create an add-on to help me get rid of these things because this annoys me.
Yeah.
And so I set out and did it.
How was the response to that first add-on?
Well, I actually, it was my first paid product I ever released. I released it on the Blender Market, and it was actually surprisingly good. I created this animated short called Jim, which I wrote a little poem for. It was like, Jim's a Blender artist, a master at his craft.
The big head.
The big head guy, yeah. And basically just told a story about how this guy named Jim had unwanted project files that stopped him from uploading his file to a render farm. So he got Atomic Data Manager and cleared it out. But after posting that and after, hinting at it in a few live streams and, dropping it on Twitter and stuff and getting some people's attention, it started doing really well. It sold it didn't sell like massively, but it sold more than I thought it would. I thought it would maybe sell like 20, 30 copies tops. And I was selling it like $5. So that's like what, $150? Or wait, no, that's bad math. Wait, no, that was good math. No. Yes, that's like $150.
Yeah.
But what it actually ended up doing, I think it got a few hundred downloads, a few hundred purchases, and a few hundred people downloaded it. I was like, oh, cool. But then I kind of just stopped doing anything with it because school picked up again and I had to focus on that again.
And then what came after Atom Bomb?
After Atom Bomb, I took a hot minute to do nothing. I think at the time, what was I doing? Because I released Atom Bomb my senior year. That's when I released my top add-ons for Blender. This is also a period in time where I was just absolutely obsessed with Blender add-ons. Like, I was convinced in my head that having better add-ons would make me a better artist. Just a mention for all of you people that are looking at that are in the same scenario. Add-ons make your job easier. They don't necessarily make you a better artist. Something that's important to look at. Or they might open new doors for you, but they won't inherently make you better. Yeah. I thought that was the case back then. I had my mind set. I was like, oh, this add-on's gonna make me better. Didn't. Oh man, what was your question? I just completely lost track.
What was the next big add-on or tool that you created after Atom Bomb?
Yeah, after Atom Bomb, I think I spent that summer. That was when the flip fluid simulation came out. That's what I was doing. I was messing around with fluid simulations, and I was making videos for CG Cookie. So I took a lot of time off of doing anything really like programmy or software tool development or whatever, because I was making weekly tutorials for CG Cookie on basically a weekly show we had called CGC Weekly. And then I was also spending all of my time outside of that baking massive flip fluid simulations. Massive. Like, the final fluid simulation took 3 days to bake.
Wow.
To try and replicate barreling waves in Blender, or tubing waves and stuff like that, and that took forever. So I took kind of a break there, but then as that was my senior summer, so the summer after my senior year, after I graduated from high school. But as I took my first few classes in college in software development, I had realized that my approach to programming was like fundamentally wrong. Like, it was just hot garbage. That's where I learned how to read documentation. That's where I learned about like proper code formatting and syntax and separation of code, the modularization of code and stuff like that.
Yeah.
To make things a lot easier, more friendly for other developers, more friendly for myself, more future proof in case I ever want to expand it. Um, and because of that, it got me really interested in seeing what I could do again with Blender add-ons. And so I had been paying attention recently to all sorts of new Blender technologies. Having done CGC Weekly over the summer, it was like kind of in my head. I was always looking for new computer graphics technologies at that time. So it kind of carried with me throughout my first semester at school, or my first, I guess we're on trimesters, but throughout that first trimester, it kind of carried with me. And at the end, I realized there was this really, really great thing going on called AI denoising. Oh, what a wonderful thing.
And what is
right?
that?
For those of you who aren't familiar, AI denoising, well, I guess I should mention, if you render something path tracing rendering engine, which is physical light simulation, the image ends up coming out a little bit noisy no matter what you do. It's basically the equivalent of film grain, except produced by simulating light, right? And the issue is sometimes it can be a little bit too noisy. So it kind of takes away from your image. So you'd use a denoiser. And there are, algorithmic denoisers, meaning they don't use AI. There's a specific like programmed set of code that says, oh, if this pixel is like this, then do this. That can help remove that noise. Issue is a lot of them are meh at what they do because denoising is such a complicated task to take care of. And on top of that, they often leave artifacts, which are basically large, bulging, tears in your image. Like it'll look really goofy. There'll be this like one part that gets warped or skewed, or it looks off color or something like that. And so people created, I guess specifically NVIDIA, created an AI denoiser. It's called the Optics AI Accelerated Denoiser, which they basically used. There's a whole set of research that you can read about on it. I read the beginning of it, but I didn't get very far into it because I lost interest. But how they trained this neural network to basically go through and take noisy images that you pass in from a path tracing rendering engine and just eliminate all the noise. It's like magic. That's how AI is. It's the put it in, it does something, you don't know what, and then it just gives you something else back, and that's that noiseless image. And so NVIDIA put out this AI denoiser, and there were other softwares implementing the AI denoiser in their flow, or in their workflow. I think Redshift was one of the rendering engines that did it. Arnold had it, I think, but Blender didn't. And I was really upset about that because when you look at the AI denoiser in action, like they provide demos through their SDK and stuff. When you look at it in action, like if you had never seen an AI denoiser before and you had been working with previous like algorithmic denoisers for years, you would have been like, oh my God, what is this? Like it's a godsend. It's this amazing tool that it's like the fix it button, it's like fix my art. And it fixes it. And so I was like, I have to get this in Blender. So I ended up working on an add-on for Blender that basically re-implemented the optics, or not re-implemented, but implemented the optics denoiser. It made a pipeline between Blender and the optics denoiser. And after trying to decide what to name it for a while, I decided to go with the name denoise. Simple. D-noise. And it was the first, and I should also mention, during the development of this was like my first time really developing something that would become popular with a community. So I had a lot of people that hopped on during a beta test, that a lot of people with more development experience than me, a lot of people, there was this guy that his name's Andy. He was making his own like actual dedicated AI denoiser for Blender. I don't know whatever happened with it. I don't think he ever released it, but he was creating his own like dedicated AI denoiser and stuff. So all these people were hopping on, checking out what I was doing, and they were like giving me little snippets of information to help me make it a reality. So as the developer, I was implementing my newfound practices that I made, or that I learned about during my first trimester of college. And then all these additional, more rooted developers were coming in and helping on the project. And the end result was denoise, which is an almost full implementation of NVIDIA's Optics AI denoiser for Blender. And then I released that, and now it's like somewhere around like 80,000 downloads.
Wow. I'm one of them.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. And so at this time, where was your YouTube channel at in terms of its growth? and your frequency of uploading to it?
Yeah. So following my summer of rendering all sorts of baking all sorts of flip fluid simulations, I kind of fell off the map. I was finishing up the summer of CGC Weekly. That was my main focus. And I was finishing up all that other stuff. So as I hopped into my first trimester of college, a lot of my focus went towards college because I mentioned earlier, I'm a computer engineering student, and that requires a lot of attention. A lot of my time needs to be going to school. Yeah. Otherwise, I'm going to fall way behind. And not to mention, computer engineering is something that I'm absolutely fascinated with. So I wanted to spend more time doing it in the first place. So I started spending more time doing that. So my upload schedule basically disappeared, vanished into thin air. Yeah. And then I think I went 7 months without a single word before I said, hey, denoise. And then I think I released just a really quick trailer on Twitter, just showing me clicking the denoise button, and then all of a sudden this, doing its NVIDIA magic where it just starts off noisy and just gross, and then just instantly becoming seamless and smooth, and then that kind of roped people back in. And
was it the cave render? Was it the cave looking one?
Yeah, it was the cave render.
I remember that tweet.
Yep. And I was like, I remember it going crazy, and it was my most liked tweet at the time. It had like 400 likes, and I was like, cash money.
I'm back.
I was like, yeah, we back in it, ladies and gentlemen. We're back. But yeah, I mean, following that though, I think I uploaded a few videos regarding how to like use denoise and stuff like that. But yeah, they're really, I think once college started up for me, my upload schedule, especially my tutorial-based uploads, basically, I stopped having time for it.
Yeah.
So I stopped doing it.
But the good thing about your channel is you were able to use, do you remember how many subscribers you had when denoise came out?
Around 50K.
Okay, so you were able to use that to bolster and actually promote your product, which was the denoise, which I believe was free, correct?
Yeah.
That's
all of my tools have been free with the exception of Atom Bomb, which is now free. So
and that became,
I feel bad charging.
And that became, I think, your latest release, which is the Atomic.
Yeah, Atomic Data Manager. Atom Bomb became, I completely rewrote it over the last summer, so summer of 2019. Spent the entire summer reworking it, making it better, adding more features, making it so that I can actually build onto it. And if other people want to too, it's an open source project. I'm the only one who's contributed, but it is an open source project.
Yeah.
But basically rewriting it so that other people or myself can build onto it in the future. So yeah, and that became Atomic Data Manager, which is now available for free and supports Blender 2.8.
Hey.
There you go.
That's awesome. Well, I think that just about wraps up the hour. This is great. This is a very inspiring story. So just to wrap it up, what's the future for Remington?
I'm really not sure. When you ask that, that's one question I've been asking myself a lot recently, because I've my channel, I mean, it hasn't fallen off the map, but it's certainly lost a lot of momentum. Your channel, for example, is exploding right now. You're doing awesome. I think you're coming up on like 100K pretty soon here, right?
I hit it yesterday.
Did you?
Yeah.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you.
100K party. But yeah, congrats, man. That's awesome. But I mean, meanwhile, my channel is chugging along like I can get like 200 subscribers a day or something like that. So it's like, it's real slow. So I've been debating whether I want to even continue it. But I do think that no matter what happens in the future, I'm going to keep creating things that allow other people to create, whether that's under the name of Remington Creative or Remington Graphics or anything, Remington related. I've had so many Remington names. I'm going to keep creating things. I'm going to keep publishing things, sharing things with the world. And that's my objective. That's the one thing I can guarantee. But until then, I'm not sure how all that's going to work out. That's something I have to figure out. That I have yet to figure out,
Yeah, well, that's awesome and really inspiring. Well, thank you for doing this, man. I appreciate it. Thank you, everybody, for watching and listening. And I'll see you guys in the next podcast.